Let me do a sound check. How's the sound? Hear me okay? Yeah, great. And we'll get started in just a minute, but it's nice to take a little time, in your own way to connect with our virtual community. Feel the support of being able to come together like this. And we'll take the time, listen to our bodies, and find appropriate sitting posture for tonight, whatever that might be like. Doing our best to find some basic ease, comfort in the body, and that quality of wakefulness, alertness, that sense of being right in the middle. It's useful, even if it's borrowed faith, but it's useful to trust that there is some basic ease that's available, even if the mind is wild or all over the place or upset in some way, even if the body is uneasy, restless, or uncomfortable in some way. If we don't have some confidence that ease, being at ease with conditions, might be available, we won't be interested, we won't look. We won't take advantage of this capacity we have to be content with the conditions as they are. This possibility of acceptance of what is unpleasant or less than perfect. And instead, we'll just go about our usual habits of trying to fix things or deny, distract ourselves from what is unpleasant or not the way I want it to be. So in a way, this first part of our meditation, it's a courageous move where we're willing to be sensitive in the ways that we're sensitive to the conditions that are coming and going in the mind and body now. So this willingness to be sensitive, but exploring this possibility of not being dependent on what we're sensitive to. So we are feeling what we're feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, but we're exploring this capacity to not be pushed around by the feeling tone of what we're feeling, what we're experiencing. So if there is some discomfort in the mind or body, there's just stable wisdom that understands, yeah, sometimes it's like this, unpleasant. Or if you're having a really nice sense experience now, that same wisdom understands, oh yeah, sometimes it's nice. It won't always be this way, but right now it feels like this. So we don't bother to grasp it or try to hold on. We just let it feel the way it feels, knowing that things will continue to unfold as they do. And there's this more subtle pleasure of being content with the conditions as they are. Not needing the conditions of the body and the mind to be different than they are. That's its own kind of pleasure. Easeful with conditions. Or as one teacher said, not picking a fight with reality, not in conflict with the way it is. Undefended. Or we could say the courage to be sensitive, unafraid of the natural sensitivity of the mind, the heart. That's what I mean when I sometimes say sitting right in the middle, or we could say sensitive right in the middle of these changing conditions that we call my life as it is right now. And if you'd like to help stabilize present moment awareness and build some momentum, some continuity of present moment awareness, recognizing the sitting body, or more specifically, the movement of the breath coming in and breath going out. Being at ease with conditions of the breath, or being at ease as best we can with the conditions of the sitting body. Doesn't mean that the body or the breath will be the way we want it to be. Instead, we're exploring, in a sense, if it can be good enough to be content, to not be in conflict, not need to fix anything. And tonight, especially interested in any reactivity, any self-centered storms, dramas that might arise. Instead of immediately trying to fix or trying to get rid of, notice the underlying nature of these self-centered dramas, patterns of mental proliferation, noticing that they arise due to certain causes and conditions, and they cease according to certain causes and conditions. It's a real sign of deepening when, in our practice, we can be aware of self-centered dramas for what they are. We just see them as a self-centered drama that feels like this. We see how it arises, we see how it passes away. We don't believe the thought that we can't practice when the mind is disturbed in this way. We just get interested in the disturbance itself as a phenomena being known. So even if the mind, even if the body to some degree is acting out, it's possible just to be wisely aware, compassionately aware. Oh, it's like this. This is what's moving. This is how it feels. Like everything else, it comes, it goes, according to causes and conditions. So we'll continue in silence now. And take a little time, stretch the body as you need to, move a little bit. Nice to see everybody tonight. Appreciate you showing up. So I'm back drawing some inspiration from Ajahn Chah's teachings, this book, The Collected Teachings of Ajahn Chah. And I've been putting into the chat there a document that has the link in case you'd like to read along. And sort of in the middle of the book, I think, chapter 44, the wave ends. And in this chapter, the first part, Ajahn Chah is really talking about how to practice with these storms that blow in, the dramas. And a lot of the time, when the mind gets swept away by some wanting storm or some aversion storm or whatever the distraction, the particular flavor of the distraction, it seems clear initially, like, oh, I just need to get rid of this bad activity, because it's in the way of my meditation. But when we do have enough confidence and some stability of present moment awareness, we actually want to be interested in the distraction as a phenomena that's being known. Whatever it is, all of a sudden, for whatever reasons, the planning mind takes off, and the mind is getting excited about what it's planning. And then at some point, the practice kicks back in, and there's a recognition that the mind is lost in thought. The mind is planning, and there's some underlying feeling or flavor to that planning. Maybe we like it, or maybe we're anxious and worried and fearful about it. And the interesting thing is, how do we practice with it? So the chapter 44, the wave ends, it's called. It begins with somebody asking Ajahn Chah a question. Although we know that these things are objectionable, right? So they're talking about some storm that's blown in. We are unable to prevent them from arising. Could it be said that even as we are aware of them, this is providing the basis for increased clinging and attachment, and maybe is putting us further back to where we started from? I mean that we can be both aware of them and repelled by them, but lacking the ability to resist them, they just burst forth. Right? So the person is just like not knowing what to do. Now the interesting thing in the way this person shared and raised the question, they did have enough space in the mind, enough space of wisdom to know that what was sweeping their mind away was unskillful. And we want to appreciate that. That's actually clear seeing. Like knowing we're caught in some drama, knowing that my mind is acting out, maybe even my body's acting out, is a good sign. We'd much rather, the Buddha would make the argument, I think, that we'd much rather be aware of when we're being unskillful than being oblivious when we're being unskillful. Because when we're oblivious, when we're unaware, then there's no possibility of learning what that self-centered drama is ultimately. That it's changing, that it's not worthy of grasping. Any taking it personally, any identification hurts. And that the arising of the drama itself is not personal, it's nature. Some of you know this, that one of the words the Buddha used to describe how our mind gets swept away, asawa, which we usually translate, and sometimes it gets translated as the floods. the cankers, the taints, what corrupts the mind. Another great translation is intoxicant biases. So again, the word is asawa. And these floods of sense desire and the flood of wanting to become, wanting to be, attachment to existence, to some idea I have of myself and getting attached to that idea, and attached to any of our fixed views, self views. And given how our mind has been conditioned, by culture and maybe even genetically, it's sort of the underlying law that these floods will get triggered, will emerge in our meditation periods and all day long. So it's useful to have that attitude about them, not to interpret, like when our mind gets swept away in some unskillful way, not to interpret it as a miserable failure on my part, but more like, well, of course, sometimes the mind's going to get swept away and it will feel like this, it will look like this. And what is this? Like, this is the real turning point when we have enough confidence and enough momentum, stability of present moment awareness, continuity of present moment awareness, that we can actually be interested in the drama as a phenomena being known. You can even use that phrase, it's the law. If the mind has certain habits, certain patterns, conditioned patterns that have their own momentum, well, of course they're going to manifest then at times when the conditions, the supporting conditions are there. And sometimes when an unskillful pattern gets triggered, it's seen and it immediately evaporates or falls away, right? And it's part of this statement that it's the law is just the pattern that has the most momentum. Well, that pattern will have its say in the mind. So if the pattern of craving has, in a particular moment has more momentum than the wisdom that sees craving for what it is, unhelpful, stressful, impersonal, impermanent, not worthy of clinging. If that wisdom is stronger than the habit to act out and to think through, proliferate around this drama, then it won't last very long. But a lot of the time, the momentum of the habit, the distraction, the greed, the aversion, that has more momentum than the strength of the wisdom. So wisdom will still be there, but it won't be able to stop the mind and maybe even our body from acting out whatever's gotten triggered. And the important thing is we don't want to give up practicing just because we're being unskillful. I'm sure you've noticed this in your mind, well, I've already blown it, so why bother? I'm already being bad. Why make it worse by noticing that I'm being bad? It's like I might as well be bad in ignorance, like be unaware. We think that it's more skillful, but like I mentioned earlier, there's no learning. So although it's unpleasant, we want to keep recognizing that it's like this, and especially the underlying nature of the whole drama. And it's important, like this talk is really about the three characteristics, because this is the advice that Ajahn Chah gives this person, to be aware of the defilement. The kilesa is another word. So there's asawa, the floods, and there are the hindrances, and then another word, kilesa, which usually gets translated as defilements or mental torments, you could say. And this is greed and hate and delusion, conceit, fixed views, skeptical doubt, dullness, restlessness, the absence of regret and the absence of moral dread or wholesome fear, wholesome concern. Right? These are the 10 defilements. And it's like we want to develop a kind of fluency when they're there. And we want to see the three characteristics, the underlying nature of these defilements, these floods, these hindrances, that they're an unfolding process. And when the mind takes them personally, as opposed to observing them as impersonal phenomena, right, it's consequential. If we take these self-centered dramas personally, the mind gets seemingly personally entangled. And the drama, we proliferate, right? And there's that feedback loop. The more we take it personally, the more we personally try to stop it or feed it, it just, like a vortex, it just feeds on itself. The heart gets more and more entangled. But it's in observing its underlying nature that is actually liberating. But it, like I said, I've been saying, it takes some real confidence and stability to actually observe this changing nature. Like even knowing, like if we're really upset, really angry, or we're really obsessed about something, just having the bigger picture that the mind previously wasn't this way, and now the mind is this way, kind of opens the mind to, it won't always be this way, right? That because part of the delusion of some self-centered drama that's gotten triggered is this is who I am in some meaningful, permanent way. It doesn't occur to the mind unless there's some wisdom that this is a passing weather system. It may be quite intense, it may be all-consuming, but it's something that has arisen and will pass away. And it's good, to reflect back, especially more recent dramas. Oh yeah, earlier today I was really upset. I was really obsessed. I was really this or I was really that. And now it's nowhere to be seen. And to really let that land, that truth that these patterns are impermanent. This is Ajahn Chah responding to the person's question. By then, it's already beyond one's capacity to do anything. At that point, one has to readjust oneself and then continue contemplation. Don't just give up on them there and then. When one sees things arise in that way, one tends to get upset or feel regret. But it is possible to say that they are uncertain and subject to change. Right? Just that little, he's saying that just that little bit of wisdom, and whether you say it out loud to yourself or not, but when a drama is consuming the mind, sweeping the mind away, just to bring into the picture that this is uncertain, like the story that this is saying, I'm really upset, I'm not okay, that's uncertain. That isn't the whole truth. Or that this is really how it is now, as if it's not going to change. This isn't the whole truth. This is also subject to change. And he goes on, he says, what happens is that one sees these things are wrong, but one is still not ready or able to deal with them. It's if they are independent entities, the leftover karmic tendencies that are still creating and conditioning the state of the heart. And this point I think he's making is really important. Like when we can observe that we're caught, but there's enough stability, enough space of wisdom that knows we're caught, we really see the impersonal nature of these dramas, right? They have their own coherence, their own intelligence, really, and how they operate and how they capture the attention of the mind, and how they have um, a tendency to keep feeding the storm, like by what the mind has the impulse to pay attention to, and the way that it tends to want to pay attention to what it tends to pay attention to, feeds, adds more fuel to whatever the drama is, whether it's more about aversion or more about greed. But all that can be observed, that coherence, that intelligence, like the drama knows what it's doing. And it's actually brightens the mind. It's like amazing. And you probably know this experience. I mean, you might know it in terms of your own mind, watching your own mind. But we also see this like when we observe somebody we're close to and they get into some drama, you know? And it's just like, especially people we know quite well, it's like, it's familiar. It's like, oh yeah, they've just disappeared for a while. They're in this loop, and they're going to be, we would say this to them, they're going to be crazy or unworkable for a while, because we get to know kind of the basic rhythm, like how long it lasts and when it's peaking and when it's beginning to fall apart, right? Oh, you're coming back to kind of your normal, relatively wise state. Good. Glad that's over. But it's even more amazing when we can observe it in our own mind. And that's really the development of wisdom. Wisdom manifests subjectively. Like how do we notice wisdom? We notice it as a kind of space that is always there. So the normal patterns of our conditioned mind continue to express themselves depending on, the supporting causes that are there. But every time there's a particular pattern that's gotten triggered, there's a sense of space, a space of knowing, a balanced knowing, a unflappable knowing. Sometimes that space is more vast and stable, sometimes it's more feeble. But it casts a different light on these otherwise very personal, captivating dramas that we get pushed around by. Because knowing that the mind is caught is not the same as just being caught in a drama. So let me just finish this piece from Ajahn Chah. I'll go back a sentence. He says, what happens is that one sees these things are wrong, but one is still not ready or able to deal with them. It's as if they're independent entities. And a little later he says, one doesn't wish to allow the heart to become like that, but it does. And it indicates that one's knowledge and awareness is still neither sufficient nor fast enough to keep abreast of things. And later in this talk, Ajahn Chah says, one must keep up a continuity of effort and try to make one's awareness fast enough to keep in touch with the changing mental conditions. And here, of course, the effort is the effort to be interested and to sustain the interest, like not believing the thought, I can't practice when my mind is so wild, or when when I'm angry, or when I'm obsessed with greed, or whatever it is. Like we really have to develop the confidence that wisdom and awareness, it doesn't really care what the experience is. That simile we use of the mirror. In the same way, a mirror is really equanimous about what happens in front of the mirror. It just will reflect it. And it's the same with our practice. We want to develop that confidence that our practice can manifest at the ugliest moments, at the most beautiful moments of our lives, anytime. Any moment is a suitable moment to be aware that it's like this now. Oh, it's just this. And to be interested, like with the continuity of present moment awareness, to really let the deeper underlying nature, in this case, we're talking about these emotional, psychological storms that sweep us away, to get interested in the underlying nature and to use the teachings on the three characteristics to help us see. So it's not like we're trying to impose the three characteristics on our experience. The teaching is really a way to inspire us to listen and feel and allow the storm to reveal itself, like that there's more to see, that it's changing, right? Anicca, impermanence, that it's not satisfying, it's not worthy of attachment or grasping, and that it's impersonal. Like it's the unsatisfactory is like, I can't be at ease until I resolve whatever's gotten stirred up in my mind. That's the dukkha piece, right? That needing to resolve something is like it's never ending. Things don't get resolved. Have you noticed in life? I mean, we tell ourselves so we can go to sleep at night, oh, things are resolved. But they're not really resolved. You know, I'm not saying that sometimes the appearance of things being unresolved isn't greater than other times. But we've never really, like life, having a mind and body, being in relationship with others is completely a setup. Things never get all done. Things are never completely perfect and settled, right? This is, you could say, a restless realm, being a human being. It's restless. It's uneasy. So the resolution doesn't come from making the world different than it is. The resolution comes from understanding something deep about the nature of this world, the nature of existence, the nature of me experiencing this. And the Buddha talks about that, like to help us get interested, that there's something insubstantial. What appears to be substantial, and we'd say real, is actually insubstantial, ephemeral, impermanent, unreliable, uncertain, dukkha, not capable of satisfying. The heart that wants to be satisfied can't be satisfied by grasping conditioned reality. Conditioned reality will never offer the ground, the safety, the permanence that the heart seems to want, and that it's impersonal. So it's kind of nice to memorize the three characteristics: anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca is the impermanent, ephemeral, underlying nature. Dukkha, unsatisfactory, like whatever, even really nice experiences that we have, we can train the heart, wisdom, to notice that even when it's really nice, it's not satisfying. I remember just a silly example, but it's telling. Joseph, after way back when, it's been several decades now, but one of the great benefactors of IMS, at some point, maybe it was in the early 90s, I'm not exactly sure when it was, but somewhere around there, maybe late 80s, early 90s, this benefactor had two really nice townhouses built for Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein right next to the retreat center. Because for many years, 15 or so years, they were just living in one of the rooms in the retreat center, like kind of exposed to all the retreatants coming and going, not having really much privacy ever. And so they, just 100 meters away or 150 meters away, they built a couple nice townhouses right next to each other for Sharon and Joseph. And Joseph, when it was done, and talks about all the, just how many choices he had to make, for all the fixtures and this, the paint color and all that. And finally, it's a nice place, it's private. But he realizes, you got to keep cleaning it. It gets dusty. The carpets need to be vacuumed. The garbage needs to be taken out. It's like, it's not, it's not like paradise having a nice place, right? It's work. And eventually, probably about now, having been built 30 years ago or whatever it was, it probably serious repair work needs to happen. The roof maybe needed to be changed or this and that. It never ends. It's same with our body. You got to feed it, and then you got to poop, and you got to wash it. You got to trim the nasal hair, nose hairs, and now at this age, the things that sprout out of your ears, and shave your face if you want, and all the different things that just keep happening. It's never done. The restless realm. So this is something, um, to use the three characteristics, and I'll talk more about it next week. We'll come back because there's a lot here. And by the way, the Buddhist Studies course this winter is on impermanence, and it begins on the 13th, this coming Monday. So that's 7:30 to 9 for 6 Mondays, online or in person. And the Buddhist Studies class is really for people who have an ongoing practice. But yeah, consider that if you're interested in this topic. And then we're going to do all three characteristics. So Shelley Graff will be teaching the spring course on dukkha, the unsatisfactory nature. And then I'll teach the summer course on anatta, the impersonal nature. So for the next 3 seasons, we'll cover one of the 3 characteristics. And this is, the Buddha didn't give, in the early Buddhist tradition at least, didn't really give teachings about ultimate truth or, the metaphysical, nature of things. But this teaching on the 3 characteristics, it's something that is available. It's meant to inspire interest so that we're seeing not just the surface of our experience. The kind of surface level of experience is what we think we're seeing, what we think we're experiencing. And then with some more stability of present moment awareness, we begin to notice more of the specific characteristics of a sight, like the particular, shape that we're seeing, or the particular color that we're seeing, or the, amount of light that we're experiencing, or the particular pitch of the sound, or the particular hardness of the touch, or softness of the touch, or warmth of the touch, or coolness of the touch. So that's the whole level. You could call it the elemental level of experience, including thoughts too. Thoughts are made up of components. And so we can kind of deconstruct experience. And so we're less in the conceptual realm and more, you could say, the elemental realm of our experience. So we have the conceptual realm, the elemental realm. And then if we continue to stabilize present moment awareness, the continuity of present moment awareness, then instead of just seeing the elemental nature of the sights, the sounds, the touches, the thoughts, we'll start noticing some of the universal nature of all phenomena. Like whatever it is that we're noticing, it's in motion, it's changing. And in that sense, whether we're talking about a sight being seen, or a sound being heard, or a touch being felt, or a thought being known, if it's changing, then it's not really a thing, right? Because it's coming into being and going out of being, and so the next phenomena can be known. So there's something deeply ephemeral or insubstantial about all experience. Even touch, like if you feel something hard, the concept, like I'm touching the table that's in front of me now with my hand, that's the idea. No, no, this table is a table. It's impenetrable. It's hard, right? It's substantial in that way. But when I go beyond my thought table and all that my past conditioning tells me about hard wood, and I just go to the touch and just feel the immediacy of touching. It's like it isn't the idea of a wooden table that goes away. It's not actually needed for the mind to be really intimate with the touch. And of course, I'll start to notice the smoothness, and if there's an obvious temperature, I'll notice that, and maybe the hardness or maybe the softness of the wood, or whatever roughness or smoothness of the table. But if I just continue to be feeling, and the mind settles, becomes more subtle, the awareness more subtle, then I'll notice the ephemeral nature of the touching. So whatever I'm feeling, I'll notice that it's in motion, that it's a changing process. And so it will have an effect on the mind, noticing the more subtle, right? And the effect that we're looking for is the mind loses its attraction, its dependence on sense experience when it sees the underlying nature. Whether we're seeing the underlying nature of our thoughts about things or the underlying nature of sight and touch and hearing, smells and tastes. So that's the arising of dispassion or disenchantment. We realize the world that we've constructed with our thoughts about experience is not actually the world we live in. And it's really important that this whole section or chapter that we're covering tonight, the Buddha is saying it's really important to see the three characteristics, to experience deeply the nature of these dramas that come and go in our mind, to see how ephemeral they are. How many dramas just today have come and gone? How wonderful our moments of happiness have been, but would they really be as wonderful if we knew they were going to go away? Try that sometime when you notice that you're really happy. It's not like you're trying to destroy the happiness, but you're just coming into the truth of this experience of happiness. Yeah, the mind is really happy, and things are changing. It won't always be this way. I've been happy before, and then other things came. This will pass. Others, emotions, attitudes of mind will come. Or you're having a really wonderful day, and you just have that wide space, that contextual space of awareness that understands tick, 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 the day's going, and eventually it will be Wednesday or Thursday, and can't hold on to it. Or you're feeling, the health and vibrancy of your body. You just had a workout or playing pickleball or whatever you like to do. And then, but you just sort of, well, won't always be this way to be able to play. Like that, sometimes we chant at the center the five remembrances, and the fourth one being, all that is mine, all that is beloved and pleasing to me, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Right? Just that's not an idea. We can actually sense that in everything we have. We see, like, I think it was Ajahn Mahabua, forget who it was. No, I think it was Ajahn Chah. He had this, somebody had given him a really nice teacup. Monks, Buddhist monks can't have really too many possessions, but they can have a cup, and they can have a toothbrush and, a few other requisites, couple things to wrap around their body, the monastic robes, but somebody gave him a really nice teacup, evidently, according to the story and he gave a little talk. He says, I see this teacup because people were wondering, like, what's that monk doing with a really nice teacup? So he maybe felt like he needed to explain himself. He says, like, I see this teacup as already broken, right? Like it's going to last, and then it won't. Then I'll drop it or somebody will break it, and that it kind of is the antidote for getting attached. This is Ajahn Chah again. Gradually, little by little, one's practice should gain momentum. And as time passes, whatever sense objects and mental states arise will lose their value in this way. One's heart will know them for what they are, and accordingly put them down. The path has matured internally when, having reached the point where one is able to know things and put them down with ease, one will have the ability to swiftly bear down upon the defilements. And bear down, it's kind of aggressive language, but I think he really means like very quickly, because now it's become a wise habit of mine to see the impermanent, unsatisfactory, impersonal nature, like if we're having a greed storm, and just to very quickly liberate the mind. We still may get what we want, like oh, I really got to have that. And then the wisdom gets interested. Oh, what is this? It's this defilement, it's this storm that's blown in. It's impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, it's not self, it's just nature, the nature of the conditioned mind. And all of a sudden the enchantment can fade very quickly. And then the choice whether we're going to actually do something to get what a moment before we were obsessed about, well, then it's just a pragmatic question like, is it doing any harm to have what the mind previously was obsessed about? Right? We don't always have to avoid experiencing or having what we want. We just don't want to be dependent on having what we want. Right? It's the dependence that causes the suffering. Eating ice cream doesn't cause suffering. Needing to eat ice cream causes suffering, right? Having to have it, and the same thing with aversion. There's nothing wrong with getting rid of what is unpleasant to us, but needing to get rid of what's unpleasant is itself suffering, right? Like I've got some pain in my jaw, and it's not this. I don't know what it is, so that adds a kind of another twist, like, is there an infection or what's going on? And so I want it to go away. But becoming the person who doesn't like it and needs it to go away is just unnecessary suffering. Like pain is inevitable. Maybe you've heard this little teaching that sort of comes out of the Buddhist teaching. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. So when we have a body, we'll get some ailments, some difficult experience at times. And then the question is, how does the mind relate? And if we have that space of wisdom and we're interested and we let the experience reveal itself, we'll see that the real suffering is when I become the person who doesn't like this or wants it to go away. Then in a moment it can become really unworkable. And then in another moment where that whole drama falls away, but the pain persists, it's not a problem. It's pain being known. But no construct in the mind and heart are rising to resist the pain. why bother resisting the pain? If there's something I can do, well, then do it. And if there's nothing I can do, or if I'm not going to do anything right now, well, then there's nothing I'm going to do right now. But why construct, in a way that's stressful, a mark that feels put upon or that feels afraid? I mean, we do it because of the force of habit, and we need to be forgiving and patient about that, like we've been talking about tonight, and get interested in that whole mark that arises who's frightened by it or wants it to go away. Yeah, just to see the ephemeral nature of that, that isn't really me. It's something that has arisen conditionally because of habit, that's actually in process. It's an unfolding thing. So if in any moment I don't renew the mark who's afraid and doesn't like it, then it's not there. It has to be renewed. Delusion, unskillful pattern of the mind, it has to be renewed moment by moment. We don't see that because it's subtle, but it is getting renewed. But when there's wisdom there that kind of illuminates, then in any moment the mind can cease renewing it, and then the mind is free of it if it's not renewing it. Part of the delusion of being caught in one of these storms is imagining the storm itself is me, and is in that sense very substantial. So when we're convinced that that's true, this is me and it's substantial, that drama I'm in the middle of, I really want this to go away, we're not going to see it being renewed. The mind is just too gross, too caught to see the underlying nature that's here. And that not seeing it is related to how we keep feeding it, keep renewing it, and on it goes. I'll just end with the simile that Ajahn Chah uses in this chapter. Remember, this book is available online, freely downloadable, so you can reread the chapter or read the chapter if you want. And the document that I've been putting in the chat, it has the link to the collected teaching, so you can just look for chapter 44, The Wave Ends. And this is where he uses that simile, like the waves crashing at the shore. So he uses that as a simile. I don't know if it's a perfect simile, but it's helpful to me. Like, because we have a conditioned mind, a personality, conditioned tendencies to be afraid, to get angry, to be greedy, those waves, and the triggers all around us. So there's going to be waves, but the shore is sort of this wisdom. Like, we learn, like, it's okay for greed to get triggered. It's okay for aversion to get triggered, because there's a wisdom that understands what greed and aversion is. It's something that comes and goes and is not self. And any attachment, any identification hurts. So why would we get attached? Except when we're not paying attention and we forget. Then, of course, the habit of taking greed and aversion personally will express itself. But even then, even if we've been wrapped up in it for 10, 15, 30 minutes, then in the next moment, if wisdom arises, oh, it's this being known. So we drop from the identified to having some space around it that sees it as a phenomena. The greed monster is just something being known, or the hate monster is just something being known. Oh, it feels like this. And in moments when there's a lot of momentum, and maybe, the experience of an enlightened mind, it's really the not clinging becomes what the mind is paying attention to. So no matter what gets triggered or what is unfolding, the mind is what it's seeing, in a sense. What wisdom keeps seeing is the non-attachment. It sees a sight, but the wisdom is interested in the non-attachment to the sight. A thought arises, and the mind is interested in the non-attachment. And some of it, we hear that and we think, well, that person would be really incapable of functioning. But when people talk about that experience of flow, which is not that unusual of an experience, whether you're doing it with sports or hanging out with a friend or playing in some way, and there's just a little of that experience of everything happening on its own. It's really in those moments, there's not much attachment. And like, but our play can be quite nimble and skillful and clever and creative. We don't need attachment to function as a human being. We think we do because it's so predominant in terms of our habit energies. Anyway, as I mentioned, we'll come back to the 3 characteristics next week and dig in a little bit more with impermanence, unsatisfactory nature, and the impersonal nature, anatta. But there's time now for comments or questions, your own learning, when these storms have come up for you. And both successes and failures, right? We learn from our own failures, like how that didn't work. Yeah, what comes to mind? Feel free to unmute yourself. It's always nice to share your first name and if you want, your pronouns, where you're coming in from. Anybody feel like getting the group started? Go ahead, Mamie.
Just reflecting on impermanence and ease. I was sitting with a wise friend recently, and there was a moment of confusion between us. And my friend just said, "Am I misunderstanding you?" And I said, "Yeah." And we didn't resolve it. It was like there was just this ease in that moment. It was really beautiful. Like the ease of being undefended and misunderstood, but by just seeing it together and not trying to get to the bottom of it. I'm also thinking of a lot of impermanent examples and like being pregnant and the fear of childbirth, and remember standing outside in the snow, worried about what it would feel like, the contractions, and then just watching like the snowflakes fall on my black jacket and touch the jacket and its perfect kind of crystal sharp structure and then slowly disappear. And that actually became a support during labor, and also the support of a wave was the most useful support, you know, um, just like the peak of the pain, the arising and the falling of the pain. And that's what labor was. It was this really beautiful, intense practice. Um, and then finally, the final examples of, really working with anger lately and seeing how I can look at anger, relate to it differently, and of course, like I can be unskillful with anger. And but recently just feeling anger arise, and with this partner of mine or this companion, just feeling like just able to say, "Oh, I'm feeling angry right now," in a calm way, and then saying, "And anger wants to speak, and it has something to say." I'd like to share what anger has to say, and there's just like a spaciousness around it. But I think in part, like all of that is kind of like comes from this letting go, like almost like your life flashing before your eyes. Like, what is there to do but relax and observe and kind of, be in awe, um, with an open and soft heart. And I hope I Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful practice in life. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mamie. Really beautiful testimonial about just a natural learning over years of Mamie's practice of how the underlying nature of the three characteristics just are related to greater space, greater freedom, greater nimbleness in life. Yeah, this it's nice to hear these testimonials. Other people or another person? We have time for at least one more, maybe two more folks about your learnings or questions that are coming up for you. Yeah, go
Mark,
ahead, Nick.
hey, Nick, they, them. I'm in St. Paul, and I'm going on a date tomorrow night with a boy who's really cute, in my opinion. And it's so it's a really good movie that's going on. The desire, my mind thinks it found an escape hatch. Like if this works out, I'm gonna get out of this human condition. I'm gonna escape the human predicament if this goes the right way. And the teacup metaphor was really, really great because I just kind of applied that to the situation. And I thought, looking at him as if he already broke up with me really reduced the attachment to the situation. And I don't know if that's how it was supposed to be applied, but I was like, oh yeah, whatever this is, I barely know this person. Whatever this is, it's impermanent, and it's so why not just view it that way from the beginning? And that's actually making it feel way more enjoyable, um, and light. So just thought I'd share that.
Yeah. And and there's more to the curriculum, Nick.
Yeah.
You also have to imagine it going really well for a
Hmm.
long time
Okay.
and be okay with that too.
Okay.
It's just like the
Sure.
whole everything under the sun, it's like you're ready for any possibility with it. And so this is a proper use of imagination. Like and obviously the breakup thing is where we're going to go first because that there's just so much charge about putting ourselves out and then knowing that it may not last. So we need to make peace with that. But in some ways, success is even more challenging than failure, because a lot of us, I mean, it kind of depends on our temperament. Like my temperament would be like, I'm going to really protect myself. So I'm going to imagine things not working out, you
Mm.
know, so that I don't get set up for hurt. But we also have to open to like real pleasure coming to us and real happiness and like really being relaxed with that because we can freak out with the joy too, like not know what to do with it, like just let it move through us without making the joy our salvation. It's just a lot of joy, a lot of happiness, and because we don't really and then most people in this practice, they learn how to deal with difficulty first because that's just sort of what's up in our curriculum. But ultimately, we have to learn to deal with real joy and happiness without getting confused by that. And in a way, it's harder
Mm.
because we feel like when things really are nice, we feel like, oh, it's okay to put down the practice because things are really nice. But we want to keep seeing that, yeah, who knows? Right now it's really wonderful, but who knows? Have a nice time tomorrow night. Report
Appreciate
back.
it. I will absolutely, Mark. Thank you.
Great. Any last thoughts? There's 2 minutes if anybody else wants to share. Well,
Hi,
hi, Bill.
it's hi. How are you?
Good.
Um, to go to the other extreme, um, if you have a storm that you can't quell, um, with saying this is how it is, and I guess the question is, when it gets to that point, what do you do in a Buddhist practice when those things aren't working. For example, like anxiety perpetuating or becoming panic. I know part of it is going to my therapist, but but sometimes those storms can be so great, whether, depending on what's happening in your life. I don't know, in the
Yeah.
midst of that storm, what you would suggest.
Yeah, no, I'm
You're
glad
in
you
the heart
brought
of it,
that
you can't
up.
pull yourself out of it. Usual things don't work, is go out and walk in the 10 below zero weather, or is any
Yeah, I mean,
advice?
turning away from it is an appropriate move, but we want to be awake that we're turning away from it. Like, like just to acknowledge to ourselves, this thing is sweeping me away in ways that are unproductive, that are unhelpful. Like the tendency of my mind, like what I pay attention to, what that triggers, that's not helping anybody. So then we ask ourselves, well, what can I do? What can I pay
Right.
attention to? Where my mind can really connect with the present moment, but not get swept away by this pattern that's gotten for whatever is on the surface. But we want, like, so let's say we go take a walk or we go help somebody, something that we can absorb into that's wholesome. But we want to know that that pattern is there as a latent tendency so that when it gets re-triggered and shows up again, we're not surprised, we're not thrown off balance. So we don't imagine just because we're turning away from it that it isn't still part of the sort of latent tendencies of my mind. And because someday it's going to show up, but we will have enough stability and interest to be able to see it and to see the underlying nature, that's changing nature, its unsatisfactory nature, its impersonal nature. And some letting go will happen in that moment, and that will build our confidence. But sometimes it's touch and go, like we can turn to it for a few moments, but then we know, wisdom knows, we're going to get swept away. So then we purposefully turn away from it. What else can I pay attention to right now? So like, I mean, it's not really distraction, but it's some kind of skillful distraction. Like I'm going to go do this, pay attention to this over here. If for no other reason than to keep from getting swept away, that's a skillful thing.
Once you're swept away, there's no skillful action.
Once we're totally swept away, we can't even be aware we are swept away. And then we're
Just
not helping anybody. So we do want to avoid those times when we're swept away and we lose that wisdom that knows we're being swept away. Because then we're just watering or reinforcing the pattern without any wisdom that's able to sort of see that it isn't what it appears to be.
Mm.
Thanks for the comment, Bill. We got to leave it
Thank
here.
you. Thank you.
Nice to see everybody tonight. There's a half-day retreat on Saturday, and Stacy, that I'll lead in the morning on Zoom and in person. Stacy McClendon's doing an intro workshop. Buddhist Studies, I mentioned, begins on Monday night. And a big thing coming up on the weekend of the 17th, 18th, and 19th, Meg Brandelin, who's a palliative care doctor down at Mayo in Rochester, is going to be teaching on befriending death. Friday night is a more personal talk about working with death in her own personal life and as a palliative care doctor. And then Saturday, I'll join Meg and we'll do a workshop on some of the Buddhist teachings around death and dying. And then Sunday afternoon, Meg is going to have a more pragmatic workshop on like how to prepare, everything from your medical directive and just understanding some of the nuts and bolts of this thing that's going to happen for all of us and going to happen to our friends and family as well. Take care, everybody. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want and say good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Good night.